Okay, we are going to answer some questions from Swiggle and then some live questions. For winner picking n8n, why did we create 2 workflows instead of 1? I don't know, just Quad did it. Just, I don't know. it can be 1 workflow for sure. Very detailed instructions were used to create workflows. Are official SKUs releases from n8n related to the official n8n recipe? Again, question for me. Yes, these official SKUs can be used with Quad. I didn't plug into this these workflows when I created them, but I'm using them with Quad code. Okay, so next question. How can I get started using n8n to build AI agents for barbershops that answer phone calls and handle bookings instead of the barber? Okay.
To build a workflow like this one, you will need other stuff. You can build this only with n8n. You need to have, for the first, a digital phone number like an SIM card. I don't remember who was selling these things, but you need something like this. I have a similar workflow where the phone call is transcripted and sent to n8n. And after this, it sends the answer immediately, and an AI agent is talking to you. But for more detailed stuff, I think there are a lot of examples in internet how you can do it. But just we are only with n8n, I think it's not possible.
Thanks. I just want to vote here this one, but okay, let's see something else. Oh, something for Daniel. What is your token cost per 300 nodes content creator for per article? Single successful run.
Actually, I can give a quite easy answer. I can't tell you, unfortunately, because I don't handle the Claude tokens or like the account on my own. So I just have the access shared from my team. I assume it's not too expensive. Otherwise, with our 300 articles a year and each article with 300 nodes, it would make in the end the company bankrupt if it was too expensive, so otherwise we wouldn't run it. But what I can say is from my own AI agents that I have now in my own n8n instance, I just use Google Gemini and I charge, I think, $20 or such into the account, and when I run there some agents, it's basically about to be neglected. So it's like a cent for a crazy long article that I sent in.
Thanks. A question from me to Svetla is, you installed n8n yesterday in a way. What's the first thing you should automate and what you should not yet on your first day with n8n?
So first off, don't go into the agents because you're going to get confused and it's going to get complicated. Get the thing that you hate doing the most. Like you dread doing, you don't want to do, but also has a lot of volume, so it makes sense to automate it.
Yeah, thanks. And one last question from Swiggle, then there will be live questions. What did you add What did you add custom for gather metrics, I guess? I saw some Grafana dashboards. Can you tell us more about it? This is for Emo.
Yes. I have put 3 screenshots of Grafana dashboards. I usually have more. The first one, the metrics for the first one was from Node Exporter. These are the server metrics. And the dashboard I use is the example dashboard from Grafana. The second dashboard is the monitoring for the containers. I use Scanvisor on the server for the metrics. And the third one is a custom solution built by me. Maybe the open telemetry is going to fix this, and I will no longer need it. But for the moment, I'm doing an asynchronous, maybe a little bit asynchronous logging in Postgre database about all the workflows. And this was one from the examples I have showed you, where I delete the stuff in the database on every 30 days. And this is not just like metrics or anything, this is just about the information I put in the database. And that, this is the stuff I monitor and I have in the dashboards.
Thanks. And some more questions? Has someone question for our speakers? If not, I just want to make a discussion around. I have a lot of cases where I do automation, which is very boring to create automation. What's your way of doing boring automation? So, do you start them, or do you just start creating something interesting, something with agents or something else?
So, great question. Very personal approach, I think, but I always start with pen and paper. I write what I want to achieve, I write the workflow by hand, I figure out what's the business purpose and everything, and then I go into n8n. But to the second part of the question, my approach is to try to think of it as simple as possible, because you can always complicate it, you can always add agents, you can always add some meta automation, some API, some integration, some authentication, something else. But at least my experience is, if you start complicated, you're gonna get lost into the workflow, you're gonna get lost to the value you want to give. So I start simple, pen and paper, think about a process, and then do the n8n automation.
But when it's boring?
When it's boring, it's like cleaning your kitchen every day. You gotta do it. I'm sorry. It's not gonna clean itself. It's just discipline, and it's a boring answer, but it's how I push myself to do stuff that I want to do. So,
Daniel, you did like big workflows, and some of them maybe were boring. What was the interesting part, and what was the boring part of creating these workflows?
I think the interesting part was definitely all these if nodes and code nodes. So you get some data which is absolutely not structured, and then the code node afterwards. I'm also not a coder, I don't understand anything from code, so I get it also generated by Claude. And then you have this code node that basically fixes all your output, and then the if node routes it however you need it. So this was definitely very interesting to see how it's like in a train station with all the tracks going in a different direction. The boring part is then when you have the split and you have, I don't know, like 3 or 4 different outputs, and you have to copy paste all of them into the same, like you copy paste 3 or 4 times the same agent, and you just have to change 2 or 3 things in the prompt or whatever. So this is a bit, yeah, annoying, but it's part of the business.
And you, Emo, you are doing a lot of tech stuff. For me, this is kind of boring, but for you, it's not, I'm sure. So what's the boring part of your job?
I don't have a lot of borings, but maybe when something breaks, that's boring because I need to see what has broken. That's why I have built all these dashboards and all these walks and everything, because when something breaks, I need to check it. And I usually don't check it in the moment when it breaks, and when I check it, it's when the workflow history is gone, like two weeks later. And that's why I have built this solution for me. And maybe this is the only boring part. Earlier you said you don't like to put the boxes, and you don't do it manually. I like to do it manually. For me, it's boring to build it only with code, and after this, to go in the whole workflow and to start doing it like code has done like 50-60% or maybe more of the task, and now I need to go through all this and to continue. I usually like to go through the whole process.
Yeah, understand it, but yeah, for me that was changed like some months ago. So, question from the backyard. Yeah.
Okay, the question is probably but you can also answer. It's about multi-tenancy. I'm not sure if it's at all possible in n8n, and if it is possible, it's probably needed some extra steps. For example, you are making flow that is, let's say, something like personal assistant with Gmail, etc., and you want this flow to work. It's hosted by you, but you want it to work with different users. So everyone logs in within, let's say, either the flow itself or a helping program, and you want the flow to run for each different user, not by your master Gmail account and so on. Is it at all possible? Do you have any experience with this?
Can you try to explain it a little bit more? What do you mean? Well, I can see the issue with the queue mode and the multi-tenancy with your case.
Is it at all possible to create a flow that several, more than one users are logging with their credentials? They are not touching the flow, you're only hosting the flow, and several different users are logging with their credential in your flow that you're hosting.
Yes, I see now. You're talking about the UI when you log in, or no?
Yes, and the running part.
Yes.
Your flow is running different?
Yes, I will explain like a bit more technical now. You have in my way, I have one main one, n8n node. In this case, this n8n node, it's not executing the workflows. The main n8n node is getting the workflow executions and puts them inside the Redis. From the Redis, the other workers, in my case there are 3, they're getting the jobs from them for the Redis. So I think for your question, there will not be any problem like this. If it's single instance, if it's queue mode, there's no different things like this. It's only on the backside. It's just more powerful.
Okay, but you are the one who is handling the multiple instances running at the same time for different users, in this case, in your case.
No, I don't think it will be a problem. I think it's possible.
Okay.
All right. And 2 more questions, 3 more questions, and we are done with the panel. So yeah, these 2 here and on the back side.
Hello, hello everyone. Maybe just a question to Svetla and Daniel. Based on the workflows that you have created, Svetla used Gemini and Daniel used Anthropic. Have you performed any evaluations? This could be using the n8n evaluations or any other means to test with different vendors the outcome of the flows before making a decision which model to use?
Awesome question. I am very big fan of Claude, and if I can use only Claude, I will use only Claude. But in this case, the client has already had a Gemini subscription, so I was limited to the Gemini subscription. And to your second part of the question, does it vary in terms of quality of the answers? I feel like Gemini is not that good with n8n, to be fair, but in my case, I am using it for scraping info and writing content, for which is okay. But if I had to debug, I would debug with Claude. If I had to write content, would be maybe Gemini, maybe it would be Anthropic if it's native to the client. But the first thing I'm considering is if they're already using some type of model because they're already into that ecosystem. If not, depends on the task. So Gemini is pretty bad with some other tasks, like creating some pictures is bad for Claude as well. It's good with designs. So it really depends what you're trying to achieve with that specific workflow. Most of the cases, I would say like 80% I would do Claude if I can. The other 20 maybe Gemini for some specific stuff, but it depends on the client and what they're already using.
Yeah, in my current setup, basically, it's a very simple answer. It's just Anthropic Claude because of compliance reasons. But in my own instance, which I have self-hosted, as I've mentioned, I use a Gemini because I also love the whole Google world, let's say, and how everything is connected, and therefore I have obviously chosen to try Google Gemini through the API there.
Yeah, and have you done any testing using n8n evaluations, or just to compare the results, the outcomes of the flows, or no?
Is it for me?
Oh, for both. I mean.
Yeah, so I've done tests with content because I mean marketing, a lot of it's content, and the workflow build also. So I've tried to build workflows in n8n with Gemini. It doesn't work that well, I think.
Can I add something?
Yes.
So you mentioned that the evaluations, the function of n8n, this feature, let's say. I'm not sure. Do you know this feature for evaluation? No. In my past job, with a colleague, we tested these evaluations, and I don't have any case for them for now. But therefore, you expect something to be 100% sure, and you give a list of things that you think this will be the content or this will be the thing, and then you evaluate on it. So it's hard for me to use them and to think about the use case around it, but I'm sure that people are using it. So I see some use cases, and n8n are they want users to use it, so it's in the recommendations. Question.
Thank you so much for the discussion. It was really interesting. I have one question maybe for demo, because basically I have built an n8n agent, and actually I chose n8n because of its local storage, because the data I'm using is sensitive. I don't want any agent, any models to have access to it. Do you have any tips on how to make sure that the system is safe, it's not leaking any data? Obviously I have a better authentication for all platforms, but yeah, it would be useful to have some more technical tips and tricks.
Yes, you have a workflow. What is the trigger node for your workflow?
It's automatically triggers every day.
Okay. Do you have a communication with any external APIs or anything?
Yes, up here with the platforms, they have like bearer authentication, basic authentication. So I use I've connected to 3 platforms so far.
Okay, the first one, you must communicate with other platforms via HTTPS. This is the first and the main one. Also, you said that you have local storage. Do you self-host your net?
Yeah, it's a local session.
Okay. And local session.
Yeah, it's local. I use Docker and
Yes. Are you on a single instance or on a queue mode? And okay, don't mind. You have a database in both cases.
yeah.
Maybe if you're in a single instance, the recommended one is SQLite. The other one on queue mode is Redis. Both of them live on your server. You said that you use Docker. Do you use Docker desktop or okay? So the data inside the database is, let's say, safe. The only thing you should look is only about the communication with other APIs. Like if you make a request somewhere or anything else. Like in my case, my server is a virtual machine. I rent it from, it doesn't matter from where. And so the database lives on the server. And first of all, since we're in Bulgaria, if this is for work or anything else, all of this stuff must live in Europe. This is one thing that you should look about.
Yeah, I'm using BigQuery for storing my data, so technically it's outside of Europe.
Maybe it will not be a problem. It's about where it is stored, not from where it goes.
Can you make a guide for the community what's safe and what not for the group in the LinkedIn group just to share with the audience?
Yes.
Because I know this is a question that I question myself when I self-host anything. So it will be good to have some guidance on that.
Okay, just to say, in my presentation I have just 4 points about security, but it's a little bit from everything you should think about. I will make a big guide. I usually follow the security steps not only in n8n. Since I work in a bank, I follow a high-level security for everything I do, and that's why I'm doing this way my n8n. Even if I don't have anything with anything that's important for in the database or in n8n, I'm keeping it safe like it's the most important stuff on the planet.
Thanks, Emo. And one question back there. And then we'll catch up in the network. Okay, so I think I have 2 questions for Emo. So the first one is, maybe I missed it, but what exactly do you use n8n for? Because I got that you're displaying some dashboards in Grafana and doing some backups. But that's stuff that you could do outside of n8n as well. So what automations do you have running? That's the first question, and the second question is what compute do you need to run n8n? So what machines, or just one machine, what machines do you need to run n8n? How much, let's say, CPU, storage, memory, etc.?
Okay. about the first question, what I use n8n for, about automations. In my presentation, I showed the background of n8n, how I'm doing it. Like for me, in percentages, in my case, like 20% is the workflow stuff and building workflows, etc. And 80% is in the background, like the self-hosting, the monitoring, and everything else, which is more like a DevOps. I have a lot of different stuff, but maybe I can say just one thing. I just wanted to show, since I'm a DevOps engineer, about this stuff, which is my strong part. My automations are not that hard. I do maybe a basic stuff. But I like, even if it's basic, I just like to maintain it like it's very, very important and hard.
About server?
Oh, about the server requirements, I have two environments, one for test and one for prod. Before everything, I have started self-hosting on a free Google virtual machine. And its resources were awful. I don't even remember what were they, and even on them, n8n was running fine. Only some workflows which are more complicated were just taking a little bit longer. Right now, I think on my test machine I have 12 gigabytes of RAM, or 16, I don't remember, and I think it has 4 CPU. But it's perfect. I have one stronger machine, but even on the test one, everything's fine, and I haven't measured any problems. There's one YouTube video on the official n8n YouTube. You can check. They test the single instances and the queue mode of n8n. On the queue mode, they test it on 3, 4, or 5 different machines with different parameters, and everything goes fine. No problems on everyone.
Perfect. So thank you all for the discussion, thank you for the questions, and thank you for being here with the n8n community. Everything will follow up in the LinkedIn group, and just follow the LinkedIn group and the events. The next event will be in October, I think, September, October. So yeah, thank you all for being here, and have a great night.